My name is April Harris, and welcome to my webcast. This semester, we have studied historical conflicts and their methods of resolution. Today, I want to talk to you about the Six-Day War in Egypt. This violent war fits into this semester's study of collective violence or nonviolence. Collective violence is a coordinated act of violence causing physical damage to a person or an object, usually described as contentious politics, and is committed by a group of individuals. Chris Hedges, who is the author of The War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning, he theorizes that violent protest gives us purpose, meaning, and reason for living. He continues with the suggestion that not only does war give meaning to lives, but it also promotes killers and racists. Today, we look at what's at the heart of the war that's between the Arabs and the Israelis, to dissect its origin and to understand the approaches, the policies, the processes that underlie this violent outbreak in Egypt. So, the Six-Day War in Egypt can trace its roots back to 1918 when the Ottoman Empire was defeated. The Ottoman Empire was one of the largest standing empires in history. Owned by Islamic government, the Ottoman Empire was a major power in the Eastern Mediterranean. The empire underwent a separation of states into what is called mandates. From 1923 until 1948, Palestine was under the ruling of the British administration. In 1947, the United Nations recommended Resolution 181 that created independent Arab and Jewish states. In 1948, the British mandate ends, and on May 14th, Israel declares statehood. Being an independent state was very important to the Jewish people after having dealt with or experienced the Holocaust. But it also marked the beginning of the tension that sparked this Six-Day War in Egypt. After the British pulled out from Palestine, the Arabs were left jobless and without social services and civil administrations. They were lacking food and fuel. And with this increased tension, Israel is attacked by its surrounding states, to include Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. Israel wins and gains 78% of Palestine's mandate. From this win, leaves 650 to 750,000 Palestinian refugees wandering, trying to escape the war zone. The Arabs fought against Israel becoming their own country. The Egyptian military took control of the Gaza Strip and then suffered an influx of Palestinian refugees. In 1949, armistice agreement was signed between Israel and the neighboring countries, ending the hostilities of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War and established a Green Line border between Israeli and Jordanian Iraqi forces. On December 11th, 1948, the UN passed Resolution 194 that ended the hostility and gave rights of return to refugees. This was a major win for Israel, but it upsets Egypt. Jordan annexed East Jerusalem and West Bank, and in 1952, Nasser led the army and overpowered the monarchy. In 1956, Nasser became the president and the leader of the Arabs and ordered the Suez Canal seized and nationalized. The Suez Canal was used for commerce and for war. So the British were angry and sought support of France and Israel to regain control of the canal and to remove Nasser from presidency. Israel struck Egypt, but were surprisingly not supported by the French and the British. A ceasefire was called by the United Nations. So from 1957 until 1967, the Gaza Strip was under the administration of Egypt. The conflict reached its height on June the 5th, 1967, which was day one of the war at 7:45 a.m. On June 5th, the war began with the Israel strike on the Arabs, and they called it Operation Focus. 200 Israeli jets struck 18 Egyptian airfields, destroying more than 80% of the country's air force. The media played a part in rallying these neighboring Arabs to join in by displaying fake victory announcements. So Syria, Jordan, and Iraq joined the airstrikes on Israel, but were quickly defeated. This put them at a large advantage with aircrafts. The Egyptians still held their ground, though, in Sinai against the Israeli invasion. At the same time, Jordan, under the leadership of King Hussein, had begun small offense tactics overlooking the southern Jerusalem. On day 2 of the war, the Egyptian Field Marshal Abdel Hakim Amir ordered the retreat of the Egyptian army out of Sinai because he noticed the strength of the Israeli military air force. Jordan also pulled back. On day 3 of the war, Israel took over East Jerusalem and West Bank. Day 4, Israel reached the Suez Canal with full control of the Egyptian-administered Gaza Strip, and they enter Sinai. Of the 3 neighbors that joined in the war, Syria was the only one left after the Jordanian and Egyptian armies were destroyed. Day 5 of the war, Israel ascended the Golan Heights. Although Syria was alone, they fought the Israeli forces. Assad was the minister of defense, and he accepted the UN ceasefire. Israel also, on day 6, accepts the ceasefire. By this time, though, the Middle East had been destroyed. By the end of the war, Israel was 3 times the size that they were. Israel was left controlling large territories, including strategically important areas such as the Sinai Desert and the Golan Heights. Also, the politically sensitive areas of East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza. So Nasser took full responsibility of that war and tried to resign his position. The magnitude of Israel's win can be attributed to the constant media attention that was given, namely the false advertisement that spawned the spirit of nationalism among the Arab forces. The news reports that were airing leaders of the Arab war who were constantly trying to hide their failures. Israelis gained administration over 1 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and they built settlements. Israel refused to give up their gains, using that religious justification for their occupation of this land. Because of their newfound power, Israel did not comply with the international community. Palestinians realized that Israel's powers were not strong enough to protect them, and the Palestinians created their own national liberation movements. However, they were still unsuccessful. The 6-day war had damaged the Arab psyche. The vulnerable state of the Arabs paved the way for an overzealous Israeli leadership. And today, in 2018, conflict between the Arabs and Israelis continue. Groups opposed to the peace process invoke religious arguments to account for their political stance. Israelis take the religious position of their race being the chosen people and Jerusalem the chosen city.